All right, time to get into it. Brockhampton, Dave. I'm gonna kind of give you the floor to set the stage for these guys, and then bring me in when you're ready to talk about Iridescence.
I'll have you sub in with the bench real
Yeah.
quick. Uh, yeah, so we've talked about Brockhampton several times throughout the year. Specifically did a review on Saturation 3, their most recent album, but talked about that before that. I've talked about them since then. But we're just going to rehash a little bit of that. So if you've been listening, you're probably aware of this, so bear with me. But Brockhampton, the reason I think that I really latched onto them really fast and really started telling people and enthusiastically recommending them as a group was to that versatility you were alluding to earlier. I think Brockhampton, which is a uh, 12, 15 person rap collective, self-styled boy band, formed on the internet. Kevin Abstract, their pseudo frontman, basically solicited on the Kanye to the forums about people wanting to make a band, and he got all these like-minded talents from all across the country. I think Kevin's from Texas, but people from all over the place, Connecticut, Europe, all over. Mm-hmm. They all moved to LA. They're renting a house together and started making music. And that's a cool story in that regard. But like, they've also like had this really interesting path to getting to where we are now, just because Kevin, as a solo artist, started getting some buzz at the end of 2017 with his second album, American Boyfriend, being a openly gay person in hip hop. Obviously, is kind of noteworthy in and of itself. But I personally was a little too like soft for me. I wasn't a big fan of it, but I could appreciate what he was doing on it. And then also of 2017, Brockhampton released their first official group project, All American Trash. It's a mixtape. Again, didn't like it too much, but there's some songs there I enjoyed, called Ben Carson, and you could see the potential, right? And then flash forward to when they started getting real attention. 2018, that Saturation trilogy, 3 LPs from June 2017 to December 2017, and they're just rabid fan base continue to grow exponentially. I think they really connected with young kids specifically, but because they're kind of a group of outcasts, a bunch of different kids, they don't really fit in a box, right? Any of these dudes, and that was really appealing to a lot of kids, especially kids that are down in dumps, or even kids struggling with their sexuality, whatever it may be, right? It's a lot appealing about Brockhampton for young kids. And then people like me and you, more interested in them strictly for the music. They continue to grow at this really crazy rate in terms of making this really well produced music that is, once again, like the members, hard to put in a box and hard to compare to much of anyone else in the rap game, right? And it's production that is unique compared to the rest of the game. It's verse structure, song structure, everything is so different and like unique to them, and they're just so like appealing in that regard. And it also happens that in addition to being versatile and unique and different, it's also really good usually, right? So all these appealing things bringing us to 2018, where they have some controversy. We've talked about this. Amir Van, one of the founding members, sexual misconduct allegations, leaves the group.
Not only one of the founding members, but the face of their 3 albums,
literally
Saturation.
The Saturation albums. He went to high school with Kevin, and they handled this clumsily. And I think you hear this on the album, which we're going to get to. And initially one of the lines that was thrown out there a lot that people were throwing back at them was Kevin basically said I didn't see an abuse, so maybe it didn't happen. Like he said, I didn't see the abuser committing any abuse, so what do I know? And obviously we know that's a bad sentiment to have. And then Amir left the group. They said that he lied or misled them. So we don't really know. We know what their company line is, but in the meantime, right before this happened, they signed RCA Records, $15 million record deal, right? Again,
crazy deal.
These kids that are not making super radio friendly music, I think what we're really investing in, this kind of really shows what labels are interested in 2018. You're investing in the fans, right? You're investing in that ecosystem. And Saturation 3 did I think 36,000 first week in December. Came in, I think, 15th that week. And I'm really interested to see how much bigger Iridescence does, because obviously they've continued to grow, and they've also, grown within the game. I mean, like Pharrell has shown love to them. Obviously, they're friends with peers like Jane Smith and Ansel Elgort, people like that. But it's been a really interesting story, especially like me and you. I mean, fuck, like we're we're at the much older end of like their fan spectrum, right? I guess we're just kind of coming at this as critics, but a lot going into this album. And now that they've released this album, which went through 3 name changes, finally settled on Iridescence, right? Who knows how many iterations of this album there are, because they re-recorded a bunch of it, obviously, as things went down. How many Amir songs are just on hard drives now that we're never going to hear, right? Who knows?
Right.
But they had a rough summer. Go Google what happened at Boston College, and they were crying on stage. They were having a hard time. Again, they're young dudes, and we got this album, and it's definitely different, but I still think it's pretty good. But what did you think, as someone who even came into the group more recently than I did?
Yeah, I think one of the things doing a podcast together and having, I think, very different music tastes. We definitely, our Venn diagram, the middle part isn't as big as anyone that listens to the show knows. And you've made attempts to listen to albums I want you to listen to, I want to talk about. I do the same for you. And Brockhampton was something I promised you this year I was going to catch up. And I kept putting it off. Then Iridescence is coming out, and I'm like, all right, I got to do this. So like literally, Friday night, I like put the earbuds in. I was listening, and I was pretty blown away. I started with All American Trash, but I listened to that a couple. I think that actually was something that was a hindrance to me getting to Saturation, because I didn't love that project, and I was like, it's all gonna be like this, gonna be a bit of a slog. But then getting through Saturation, especially, I mean, there's some really great songs in Saturation. I think the beginning, Heat into Gold, is just like, I mean, what a fucking like an announcement of like what this band can be and who they are. But I really enjoyed the second half, and just how it became very like breezy and very melodic and fun to just kind of like vibe to. And then Saturation 2, I didn't like as much, but I thought there were some, I mean, Junkie, Kevin Abstract's verse on that is fantastic. And then like the funkiness of Sweet, I was like, this song is a fucking banger. And then I got to Saturation 3, and it starts off with Boogie, and I was like, oh shit. Like they were coming so hard on that. I also really liked Alaska. So I found so many different things, and they were so versatile. And they really captured, I think, this I want to say duality, but it's almost like a triality, where they have this very melodic kind of like serious boy band vibe to some of their songs. Then they have this very hard rap vibe, and then there's an in between where they try on this like almost Punjabi MC type sound that just makes them so fun to listen to. And it's always like, what are you gonna get? I was interested also to see, with all the stuff that happened with Amir, what was going to come out of this album. I'd stayed a little bit more up to date with where the band was at and how they were handling all the controversy, and I saw that there were some ups and downs with it. But I think they landed the ship, and I think Iridescence it's probably not their best album, but I think it's a very, very solid album, and probably my second favorite out of the 4, honestly.
Yeah, I think critically, it's incredibly commendable for a multitude of reasons. But I think because it's an album that is, I don't want to say lower energy. That sounds too negative, but I guess it's just, it's like more, it's like intentionally like a banger reverse, right? Mm-hmm. Like the Saturation trilogy, part of that identity is that that's just some fucking ignorant music, but not ignorant in like a traditional sense for rap, right?
Right.
And like there's no Gummy on Iridescence. There's no Gold on Iridescence, right? The closest thing you probably get is first song New Orleans, or like Jouvert, I think, was the closest things I could think of to like Saturation era. But also they're also pretty different. And also this is an album that is them. They've had a long year. It's at times sadder. It's incredibly introspective. effective. And not the day before you reference Junkie, Kevin's verse on that's well documented, but not same thing. They've dabbled in that, but I think a lot of them, I think almost the whole group, they all were very self-reflective on Iridescence. So that can make it maybe not as fun to revisit depending on your mood, but I think the album is still really great. So it's not a doc, it's just different for those reasons.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that difference is necessarily a bad thing. They're also at this point where, I mean, this is their Fame album, I guess you can say. So a lot of reviews are saying that. It makes sense. I mean, they're
record,
they're trying to reconcile this getting this huge accomplishment as a group. I mean, 15 million, that's $1 million for every single person in the group, which, I mean, for them is completely life-changing, while also having this member of their band who is a pretty, important member and close with the leader of the band. I mean, they, like I said, they grew up together, going through this controversy and making sense of what this means for them. I think they do a really good job of creating songs that they are lower energy than their other bangers or hits, but like San Marcos, I mean, that is going to be sung at festivals. That was made for festivals, pretty much. Like, I can just see crowds just singing that, like that ending, where they're
sure.
just singing together. I want more to this life than this. I don't know. I also felt like Honey was a really enjoyable song, one that really stood out to me. Wait, I think Kevin Abstract, that's like his Junkie verse for this album.
No doubt.
And also Tanya, I thought was a really interesting look at, and a really interesting concept to use the movies, I guess, like Rise or...
Right. And, it's interesting because, leading up to this, they released 3 Lucy's that weren't on this album, right? 1999 Wildfire was our favorite one, right? The Outcast, the Jace song, right? Then Tanya followed up pretty soon after, and I was like, I don't know if I'm digging this one. But in the flow of Iridescence, I was like, fuck, yeah, this is great. I actually really like this song. It's one of my favorite songs on the album. I think if there's a negative to this, and again, this is not this because Brockhampton has so many members, because they dabble in so many sounds, it's really hard for the music they make right now to be cohesive in the flow of an album. I mean, because it jumps around so much, it can almost be disruptive if those songs don't totally vibe or work for the listener. I think Amir's departure opened up a lot of real estate for other members of the group to continue to grow. I think Joba is a big winner from this. He really shows out. I mean, I really was starting to like vibe with him, like on Boogie, right? Boogie like steals the show at the end of that song. I'm like, all right, there's more going on with Joba, because remember how Saturation starts. Joba, Matt, Merlin, those dudes are like, they're like bit players. Like, they'll come in, they'll do cool stuff, but it was really Kevin, Amir, and Dom dominating most of the songs in terms of having like full-fledged verses, right, and doing lots of the hooks, right? But on this, with Amir gone, they've had to change, and I think that's almost all positive. The only negative I would say is I think there's a little too much Bareface on this. Bareface is the he started out behind the scenes for them, but he's the one who does like the really open singing, right? Like, sounds like nothing else that any of the other guys do. I think it doesn't work so much in some of my songs, like Thug Life, for example. Well, I thought the mix was really cool, the way they transitioned from New Orleans to Thug Life. I don't like him sometimes, but on San Marcos, he's really good. So he's a little hit or miss for me. But other than that, I thought everyone else took advantage of the opportunity to have more, room with Amir gone.
It's actually interesting. Joba, when he's really going in, almost kind of loses me with like how screamy it gets. But I think the way he's able to like go from being so screamy to also being incredibly melodic at points is really interesting. And I think I would agree he gets a lot of time on this to grow it and to experiment and explore like what his style is and what works for him. What was your favorite song off the album? I was interested in this.
I've been going to New Orleans the most, just because that's a little track. It's like Saturation. It's just, it's the closest thing to a banger, right? So I like that one a lot. But I think Wait, obviously the Kevin verse is really important. I think Jouvert is really cool. I think that's, again, speaks to when Joe was on and like really hitting his stride. It's on a song like that. Tanya, a slower song, but I really dig that one. And then it was unfortunately it's only like 2 minutes long, but I thought Where the Cash At was really fun with Merlin and Matt. Reminded me a lot of Queer on Saturation 2 in the beginning. Yeah, I mean, it's been. I'm not going to like all of their songs. I never have. That's because they make all different kinds of songs. But I can always appreciate what they're trying to do because they're doing a million things at once, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely.
Still incredibly pleased with the project, as it seems everyone is.
Yeah, it's gotten really good reviews so far. I think just in general, people like not only what they're trying to do, but their execution is usually pretty close to good on almost everything, if not good or great. So, hot band. Before we move on, I wanted to ask, where does this album rank with the Saturation trilogy for you?
Good question. I, like you, have Saturation 2 at the bottom of the trilogy, despite the fact that there are Saturation 2 songs I love. I think Sweet, at the moment, is my favorite Brockhampton song. Obviously, that's something that's changed 30 times, but I think I have Sat bottom. It's early to tell. I had Saturation 1 on my top 10 albums of 2017. And this, I'm sure, will be certainly close for my 2018 list, but I don't know. I think I still have Saturation 1, 3 ahead of this right now, but it could change. It could change for sure. Early to say.
Yeah, I think it'll probably depend on the mood that you're in on any given day moving forward. You definitely check that out, and like I said, we'll have probably one or two songs from Brockhampton on our best of playlist